Welcome, everyone, to episode 13 of our online series. I'm Allan Tate, and I'm with my co host, Irving Wladawsky-Berger. Hi, Irving.
Hi, Alan. It's always a pleasure to be here with you.
Excellent. So, before we get started, I wanted to do a brief housekeeping. The next symposium is on May 19, 2026. We do hope that everybody who's listening gets a ticket and meets us there. We are also going to have a pre event for VIPs on May 18, 2026. That will include sponsors, organizers, presenters, as well as members of our Innovator Network. Um, and I also want to mention that in addition to podcasts like this, we also have a variety of other public and limited access programming within our online community. The programming is available to members, and we have two levels. One is Friends, which is gated, but it is free. And then we have Innovators, which are paid subscribers, and that costs $75 a year. So the first series that we have is the Partner Series. So this is where we feature partners, especially MIT partners, as well as sponsors. The Partner Series happens typically at least once a month on Wednesdays, and it's available to friends as well as innovators. The Innovator Series, which Irving and I typically host, happens on Tuesdays. We try to have one a month, most months. It's only for paid subscribers. And in the Innovator Series, we often have an expert come in and do a deep dive on a particular topic, or sometimes we will hold off the record open conversations about a particular topic where we really want to give people the freedom to speak and not have fear of being recorded. But I do want to highlight our newest series, which is going to kick off on January 15th, and this is the Inquiry Series. And this will happen at least one Thursday per month, and it's also available to members of our Innovator Network. So, this is a new offering, and it's designed to explore foundational questions about technology, leadership, and society without rushing to conclusions. And rather than debates or presentations, each session uses a disciplined inquiry framework to help participants think more clearly and be comfortable with uncertainty. Each session is going to be led by me and Irving, and it's going to be structured as a live interactive podcast. So there'll be 60 minutes. They will be recorded, and we will release them to members of the Innovator Network. Irving and I will provide a brief framing. We will lead an open discussion with all the audience members, and we'll also publish a post-session briefing for people that'll come along with the recording. So the kickoff is going to be January 15th. We hope you join us there. The first question that we're going to answer is, how do machines approach problems they have not previously encountered? So, who should attend? These sessions are designed for CIOs and senior technology leaders and innovators who want to develop clear mental models for navigating AI and emerging technologies under uncertainty. As I mentioned, we have programming scheduled more or less every 2 weeks, going from January all the way through to April. After that, we'll take a pause because the symposium will be coming up shortly after we're done. So, with that, Irving and I are going to model the inquiry framework with this podcast, talking about how historians in the future will view our current age of AI. And we don't know how they're going to do that. So, I just want to be clear, we are not here to predict the future, but we're here to frame how leaders should think about AI. It's important to note that even though we don't know how historians will view the current age, thinking about it is important to CIOs in terms of managing risk, and that'll become clear as we have this conversation. Um, in terms of history only being known in hindsight, I'll give you a very brief story from an article that Irving sent me. and that noted that Rome fell in 476 AD. But that date was only picked once historians investigated and understood what the history was. The people living in 476 AD may not have realized that they just lived through the fall of Rome. And so it is with AI. So I'll start you with this thought, Irving. Every major technological era looks confusing while it was unfolding, and
Mhm.
AI is no different.
Right.
And the question isn't whether AI builds on past technologies. We know it does. But it's
Mhm.
whether it marks the beginning of something
Right.
new. And with that, let me just point out the three options that you and I are going to discuss. The first one, option one, is that we believe AI, or I shouldn't say we believe, that option one is AI is the beginning of a new technological revolution. Option two is that AI is the next phase of a decades long information and communication technology revolution. This revolution has been going on at least since the 1970s. Maybe you'll argue it's been going longer than that. And the third option is that AI is not only the beginning of something new, it's revolutionary. It is the first cognitive technology,
Mhm.
and it will be what you sometimes call a once in a millennium level
Right.
technology. So, just to establish some vocabulary, Irving, let's dig into these three options, starting with option two, that that AI is a continuation of ICT.
Right. So, Alan, first of all, I learned how to try to understand new technologies by looking at previous technologies from Carlota Perez, who is a very well-known economic historian, and in the early 2000s, she published a really interesting book about technological revolutions. And in her book, she wrote about the fact that since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, we've had a number of technological revolutions every 40 to 60 years. The first one was the era of steam power, then came the era of electricity and heavy engineering, then came the era of cars and airplanes and things like that, and then the era of digital computers, semiconductors, and so on. So uh, when looked at it that way, uh, my assumption was, okay, so now AI is one such new era. And I uh, reached out to Carlota and we had a discussion about this. And she said that, well, she's not sure that AI is already a new era, that in her opinion, you can look at the digital revolution, at the information and computer technology revolution, as having started with computing roughly the 1960s. Then it continued to evolve, microprocessors, personal computers, the internet, cloud computing. And in her opinion, we can look at AI as the continued evolution of the digital revolution. So each one built on the other one, and she wasn't sure that we were at the point where AI was as big of a change to the digital revolution as the previous ones had been. So that was her point of view, and given how she thought a lot about all this. I thought that was a very interesting point of view. I'm not sure I agree with it, but in the spirit that this is a discussion of options, not you and I saying what's right and what's wrong, it's a very interesting option to think about.
I agree. It is definitely an option to think about. And, but you and I know technological eras are more or less defined by the bottlenecks they break. And so, in the case of AI, if AI does in fact remove the constraints like cognition and reasoning, then we might find that we're in the beginning of a new era, which brings us to option one, where AI is in fact the technological revolution. So, why don't you talk about this option?
Well, the remember, let me contrast what you just mentioned. AI in is now in the next phase of a technological revolution. And if you look at computers, digital computers, the internet, they all are very similar cloud computing in that they are quote unquote deterministic. You write programs, software, hardware, architecture, and they do what you tell them to do. And all of a sudden, AI shows up. Roughly, let's say we started at the turn of the 21st century, where all of a sudden we can train these AI models with the huge amounts of digital technology that the internet has made available. And that training allows the machine to statistically uh, answer our questions, statistically understand language and answer the questions in good language, and all kinds of features that feel very different
So,
from
Irving, I'm going to,
classic computing.
yeah, let me interrupt for just a moment to bring a
Yes,
point of
please.
clarity. So when you say AI showed up, I think that what you mean, because AI's been around, say, since the 1950s from a
Yeah, you're
research
right.
perspective, but when we say that AI showed up, what we're really talking about is the release of LLMs, specifically ChatGPT, that came out maybe
Yeah,
two years ago, I think,
yeah,
and that just as an application exploded the use of AI. Um,
well, let me clarify a little bit what I mean. You're absolutely right, and I should have said this. Uh, AI actually started as an academic discipline since the 1950s,
yeah.
when some very smart people from MIT and Stanford and other places got together, I believe at at Dartmouth, and they said, well, now that we have computers here, um, we can teach computers how to do all kinds of tasks that only humans could do before. We can program intelligence. And for the next 20, 30 years, these professors try to figure out how to program intelligence. And then they realize, well, you can only program what you understand. You can program a mathematical equation. How do you solve it? Because you understand that. But Alan, if I ask you, when you look at a cat, how do you know that's a cat? You would say, I don't know. I just look at the cat and I figure out it's a cat. Yes, but if you had to program a computer to be able to recognize the difference between a cat and a giraffe and a dog and a tomato, how would you do that? You say, gee, that's a philosophical question, but it took people 20 to 30 years to realize that you cannot program what you don't understand how you know. We know a lot more than we can explain. Now,
But now we can train LLMs to.
that's totally different. So
Correct.
AI went through a series of failures but then in the 1990s, all of a sudden, we realized that if you have lots and lots of data and you analyze the data with very sophisticated algorithms, you can make a prediction as to what's going to happen. The difference is you didn't program it like you would in a classic computer programming. You just had lots of data, and that enabled the algorithm to make a prediction. For example, with Deep Blue, the computer that first beat a world-class champion in chess in the late 1980s, they didn't program it. They fed the computers huge amounts of data about previous chess matches, which were around. And every time the computer had to make a move, it analyzed.
So Irving, we're going to get deep into this in the inquiry series. So
Yes,
just to remind you, we're going to
yes,
have 7 questions for the
yes,
audience to get deep into it. But I was just trying to clarify the point that really the so-called new era,
yes.
maybe we're talking about starting in say 2023-ish.
Well,
Uh,
I would say the the second new era. It
i-
started, for example,
if AI is a new era, if it's option one, then we're talking about a new era where AI is amplifying human capabilities.
yeah,
Uh,
let me tell you how I look at this. For example, uh, if you said, how did we teach AI to recognize cats from dogs and whatever? And the way it was done, sort of in the 2010s, is you showed you train the algorithm with lots and lots and lots of pictures of cats. And then humans said, this is a cat. And then they showed it a dog, a giraffe, a lion, a tomato. This is not a cat. And by telling it cat, not cat, with thousands and thousands of examples, eventually on its own, the algorithm learned to say what's a cat and what is not. Now, let's fast forward another close to 10 years, and all of a sudden, we had more powerful computers, more powerful AI algorithms like deep models, and so on. And and there was a lot more data used to train it. In fact, these algorithms were then trained with all the digital data that was around, including all of Wikipedia, all kinds of digital books, etc. And then this seems almost magical. By giving the computer these huge amounts of data, all of a sudden, large language models emerged. I'm not sure most people expected that to happen. And all of a sudden, you can ask the computer a question in English, and the computer would almost magically understand, but all the computer was doing is based on all the data you trained it could tell, for the most part, when you're using English, this is the next word, and this is the word after that, and this is the word after that. So large language models emerged from all the huge amounts of language given the computer. And Alan, if you said to me, well, does the language have to be English? No. If you give it lots of Japanese, it will know Japanese. You give it lots of French. And in fact, if you give it lots of all these languages, the computer will actually, quote unquote, learn to translate from English into French, into Spanish, into Japanese. And that's the era of generative AI that you refer to, which it has been extraordinary, all the things it can accomplish.
So I'm gonna push forward to option three. So if option one turns out, if historians 100 years from now decide that we're living through the beginning of the new technological revolution brought on by generative AI, we're talking about AI revolutionizing how humans work. But there is another option, and that's option three. Option three is where AI is really the first cognitive
Right.
technology. And I want you to talk a little bit about this option. This is the option where AI is a revolution of the millennium.
Yes. So, and this is how I came to this. So I was reading uh, an article I believe I learned about it in The Economist, and then I went and looked at the article. And this research was uh, asking lots of people it was doing a survey on different kinds of predictions. And that they included lots of economists, computer scientists, policy people, and so on. They also included some people that are experts in making predictions. I didn't know this, but turns out there are contests about predictions that happen out there. And they asked them a lot of questions. And one of the questions was, what's the probability that AI is another of the kind of prediction like steam power, whatever, uh, steam power, electricity, cars, and so on. And I don't know, 40, 50% said yes, absolutely. But then it asked them a question I wasn't expecting. What's the probability that AI is a kind of technology, they called it of the millennium? And what they meant by that is like the printing press in the 15th century that transformed the whole way knowledge is disseminated for the last few centuries, or like the Industrial Revolution itself, that starting in the late 18th century, which introduced, totally transformed physical work, because the Industrial Revolution came up with all kinds of tools for people to now use to do physical things. It came up with steam power. It came up with railroads for transportation and so on. So it totally transformed the way people dealt with the physical world. So their question was, what if AI will do to cognitive activities, activities that until now only humans could do. What if it's a technology of the millennium that will introduce a new cognitive revolution that will be to cognition what the Industrial Revolution was to tools for physical work? And I said, oh my God, that sounds like an incredibly interesting idea. And if that's the case, AI is far deeper than at least anything I had thought about before. And just like the Industrial Revolution has played out over 150 years or more, AI will play out over decades and decades and decades. That's what all of a sudden I said, this is so interesting. What do you think, Allan?
So, I mean, to just compare and contrast options one and three, if we're living through option one, then AI is going to assist and amplify human cognition. If we're living through option three, then we're really living through a new type of cognition where machines are actually instantiating cognition themselves, not just assisting humans, and that is an entirely different kettle of fish.
Well, and first of all, in the same way, in the Industrial Revolution, we had steam power, and then 50 years later came railroads. Then another 50 years came cars and airplanes. It has played out over many decades. How do we know that the AI we have today and the AI in 2050, 2070 will not be totally different, much, much more advanced, the same way railroads use steam power in a way that was so different from when it first came out. And
So, so
point, at that point, I said, this is fascinating. This is a decades-long cognitive revolution, and let's see what happens.
all right, well, that's a great segue into the next section of what we're going to talk about. So, just to end, put a cap on what we were saying, we put three different analytical lenses on how historians might look at our current age. We don't know which one is right. We probably will never find out. Our children, maybe our grandchildren will find out. But one of the reasons these options are so hard to distinguish is, history doesn't announce when an era begins and where an era ends. And so with that,
Not any more than when you said the Roman empires started collapsing, the people in Rome said, oh my God, we're collapsing. Only historians centuries later said that. This is similar.
so give us a little tutorial on this so-called S curve that defines technological revolutions, with steam supporting the railroads, electricity moving into assembly lines, that type of thing.
Well, to be, what, again, I learned this from Carlota. There is a difference between a revolutionary technology, AI definitely is, so is steam power, and a technological revolution. And usually, what you get in a technological revolution is a series of S curves. So you get a new technology, it makes a lot of changes, and initially they are fast, but then it starts slowing down. However, the next technological revolution shows up and it starts making changes. And eventually it slows down and on and on and on. Sort of look at how steam power came along, then steam power did what it did, but then all of a sudden railroads showed up. And it took 40, 50 years to lay out all the tracks and do all the stuff they did. And then the era of cars and so on showed up. So the Industrial Revolution, the overall Industrial Revolution is a series of these S curves, each one leading to the next one. For example, Allan, we all know the assembly line revolutionized manufacturing. However, we wouldn't have had the assembly line if electricity hadn't been invented. So you can have small motors at each stage of the assembly line, which totally revolutionized manufacturing. It lowered the prices, etc., etc., etc. And we wouldn't have had the electricity that eventually led to the assembly line if it hadn't been for the previous technologies which eventually led to electricity. And in that sense, Allan, how can you and I, talking here, or anybody, predict? So if AI is transforming the whole nature of research, the whole nature of how we come up with new ideas, how do we know what new ideas will come 20 years from now? We have no idea.
Correct.
The reason this is very important, right now, people are uh, rightfully concerned, are we in an AI bubble? When will it burst? That's one question. Are we going to get to AGI, that is an AI that can do everything a human can do in 3 years or 5 years? People are looking at these short-term things. And if AI as option three is one of these millennial technologies, then I should be asking you, Allan, what will we be doing, or I don't mean we, your granddaughter, in 2050 when she'll be 30? I mean,
Well, one of the things that I always say to people when this comes up is it's much easier to predict the jobs that are going to be eliminated than the ones that are going to be created.
exactly.
And so with AI, if it is merely a continuation of accelerating information processing, probably historians will look back and say we were in option two. But if AI significantly removes the constraints on cognition and reasoning, where now we can outsource cognition to machines, then they may decide that we're in option one
And
or
Allan,
three.
I believe you once used the phrase in one of our discussions that AI will revolutionize the whole nature of doing research. So it will be used to find cures for cancer, to find cures for Alzheimer, to totally transform education, and on and on and on. And, if healthcare and education are transformed, that will change the world, correct?
Well, of course, it depends upon the level with which we believe that AI can actually solve novel problems. And of course, to discover that, you'll have to join me, Irving, at the inquiry series. But I think you've already committed to that.
I
So
have committed.
so we have seven conversations coming up where we could drill down into whether this new technology is actually capable of doing that kind of abstract reasoning. But for now, what I want to move into, Irving, is this idea that you have been bringing to my attention and asking about whether we're in a rational bubble. Can you define a rational bubble?
Yes. So one of the ways, one of the things I learned from Carlota Perez is that each of the technological revolutions has two periods. The period when the technology is developed in the lab, and then it goes into the marketplace. Everybody gets excited about it. Oh my God, look at railroads. It took, I don't know, you had to go by horse or a cart from Manchester to London because it started in the UK. That's why I'm using the example Manchester to London. And all of a sudden, with railroads, you can get there in a couple of hours. So that was a major, major difference. And uh, when the financial markets seen the possibilities of all these technologies, they go bananas and they start inventing in new startups that come up with all kinds of ideas, some of them crazy, some of them brilliant. And we saw that with the dot-com bubble. That's a very good example of what happens. So the internet comes out of the lab, it becomes commercialized. We have the dot-com bubble in the 90s. Alan, do you remember what happened to the dot-com bubble?
Oh yeah.
So it burst because of financial exuberation, and then every single bubble, every single technological revolution has gone through a bubble. In fact, railroads, which started in the, I believe, at 1940s, 50s, went through a whole series of bubbles because people were so excited about what railroads enable that they overinvested.
You,
It
you
was,
mean the 1840s and 50s?
isn't that what I said?
I think you said 19, but anyway.
No, no, I was
We
wrong.
yeah.
Yes, I was wrong. 1840s and 50s, and it sort of stabilized 50 years later, but it went through all kinds of bubbles in the meantime. Now, so when there is a new idea, there is a bubble. Now, uh, I read a really good article by a very top economist, Mohamed El-Erian, that said, yes, AI is a bubble, but it's a rational bubble. And in the article I read in the New York Times, El-Erian said he actually got idea of the notion of rational bubble from Michael Spence, who is a Nobel Prize winning economist. And the two together said a rational bubble is one where the reason you have a bubble is because the whole economy is being transformed to get it to a much better place. In other words, an irrational bubble is when people are investing in dumb ideas that they're hoping will be good. A rational bubble is where uh, people are investing and over-investing in a technology that over decades will prove totally transformative. And according to Mohamed El-Arian, Michael Spence, Tyler Cowen, who is another top economist, AI, after all, is a cognitive revolution, will so transform the economy, society, and the way we live over decades, not over 5 years, that the fact that it's a bubble is, well, Irving, what would you expect
So,
in
so just
such
to
a
put a counterpoint on
transformation?
this, if it turned out that that AI is really option two, and so it really is just an acceleration of you know uh, digital computation, you know, we could look back theoretically and believe that the investment in AI was irrational in that maybe the AI revolution that we're living through right now stalls, and AI turns out not to be capable of doing rational thinking, if you will, to the degree that people hope. There's a lot of hype out there right now about whether we're entering into an era of AGI, for example. Um,
Well, if you
you and
think,
I aren't going to get into that question
Alan,
directly. We've tried to break it down, but
yeah, but let me say, if somebody said, unless we achieve AGI in 5 years, AI is useless, that would be an example of what you're saying, that AI, well, we were taken in, but if we think of AI as being as transformative over decades as the Industrial Revolution turned out to be, that's a whole different story.
yeah, I'm just saying that if it turns out that AI isn't transformative, then it may be that we're in an irrational bubble.
Right.
Having a rational bubble that postulates that AI will in fact be transformative, and thus the investment is rational.
Right, right. Even though some people will lose their money because that happens, anyway, but other people, over time, things will be really, really very different. Productivity will increase dramatically. All kinds of new jobs will get invented. Healthcare. I mean, we spend 20% of GDP in the US in healthcare. Did you know that? I mean,
I didn't know that, but I knew it was a lot.
it's a lot. And because there is a lot of waste, because we don't know how to do it, what if in 30 years we are able to have had a revolution in healthcare that makes everybody healthier, but we don't spend as much? How about education? You and I have talked a lot about how AI might transform education, especially lifelong education. What if in 30, 40, 50 years, we'll see that education is totally different from the way it is now? That would be fantastic. So,
So, Irving, let's move on to discuss why this cognitive dimension is so important, and I'm going to propose kind of a test question to
sure.
set this up. So the proposal is, when meaningful cognitive work happens, could it plausibly have occurred without a human mind directly involved at that moment? And if the answer is no, then we're in option one, that AI is a tool used by humans. If the answer is yes, then we're in option three, because it means that we can actually outsource cognition to machines. Maybe not right now, but between now and say 2050. And so let's go a little bit deeper into this range of cognition that AI might represent.
Well, um, it depends what we mean by outsourced cognition, which, by the way, since we're talking about a few decades from now, you and I can only speculate.
Correct.
And for example, we are already starting to talk about AI agents, where people start developing agents that are autonomous. That is, they can do things on your behalf. And that's an example of quote unquote, if something is doing things on your behalf, that's beginning to outsource cognition. Like you went on a vacation in Europe, you uh, asked this AI agent, not that you did because we don't have them yet, make your reservations if something is changing, whatever. We keep talking a lot about AI agents. We barely have anything there. But what if in the future humans will be able to create all kinds of AI agents that work very closely with them alongside human agents. And that will be a major way of increasing productivity. That whatever you're doing, whether it's building, looking for oil, building a bridge, uh, developing a very sophisticated, complex program, computer system. You will do that with human agents and AI agents. That would improve productivity tremendously. And Alan, this is especially important because, as I'm sure you know, the um, the population increase is slowing down tremendously. We will not have, Daron Acemoglu told us that in his keynote at the symposium in 2025, that we have an aging population, the birth rate in advanced economies is lower than ever. So there is a real danger that that will hurt productivity because we don't have enough people. Well, if we can have a combination of humans and AI agents of all kinds working closely together, all of a sudden productivity will go way up and we'll be able to do all kinds of new
So,
things.
Irving, I want to just drill into a few specific topics with respect to productivity. So, first of all, uh, can you distinguish a little bit about automating versus augmenting tasks
I
cognition?
Most of what I have read have said that you will always have humans in the loop because even though you have a very powerful technology, it's a technology. And there are things that you were able to quote unquote teach it, but you want humans in the loop to one extent or another. At this point, because AI is still very primitive, as you know, we discussed with Isabella Loaiza, augmentation is very, very important so that the humans can help the AI in the areas where the AI doesn't do so well. However, as we start doing more and more complex things, I honestly think we will always have humans in the loop to one extent or another.
Well, so actually, Irving, let me just push back on that a little bit. We had Bernard Crespi give a presentation for the Innovator Series recently
Yeah,
on agentic commerce, and
right.
already we're talking about building agents that will make purchases without human intervention. They'll have a goal and will go and find the product and buy the product and do the transaction. So I think if it is true that we are in option three, where we might be entering a world where AI does tasks, some tasks, maybe not all tasks, but some tasks without humans, but we don't know for sure.
No, and I think again, Alan, this is now total speculation. I suspect, and again, most of what I have read, nobody's saying that we are in a total science fiction world where the technology does everything and we're just, I don't know what we're doing. Uh, but I think most people say, you will always want humans in the loop, especially as we're doing more and more complex things. There may be new things. You do want to monitor what's going on. You want to learn the human.
How do you feel about AI as a partner in reasoning and discovery?
I think it's absolutely wonderful. I think it's going to be a great partner, but notice the word partner with humans. My expectation is we will see humans and AI working closely together, and it depends on the complexity of what we're trying to accomplish. Do I think that at some point when you are planning a vacation, the AI can make all the reservations for you after you told it what you do? I can imagine we can get there. Do I think a bank will operate by just total automation without humans involved? I don't think so, because you're in a different level of complexity. Do I think the FAA, that controls airplane traffic, will be totally automated? I mean, that's an area we need a lot of help, and people are afraid to touch it because the complexity is so difficult. But you will always have people making sure everything is running smoothly. That's my expectation, but
But
I don't know.
Irving, look, there are already um, examples where humans have to give up control, at least temporarily.
Yes.
So this might be a distasteful example to some, but in weapons systems, for example, if a missile is on target, and it has to make a millisecond decision to do a course correction, there's no way to have a human intervene, and so you have multiple levels of control. So at this
Yes.
most closest inner loop, you have autonomy, and we don't know for sure if Bernard's explosion of, say, agentic commerce won't unleash some autonomous agents to make transactions without human intervention. I mean,
No, but
we
the
really don't
humans,
know how um, I mean, somebody's going to dip their toe in the water.
no, 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 I agree. But for example, people are talking about, let's say, uh, the automation of financial transactions. Maybe the AI is so advanced, it will design it all by itself. And that's how it will happen. I think no, the AI will work with humans, and the humans will make sure it's tested, it works really well, and it's the humans that working with the AI will say, AI, you're not ready, you're now ready to do it on your own, but if you have any questions, come back to me. So that's a kind of human AI collaboration where the releasing the AI to do it on its own will be done once the humans are comfortable that it's safe enough, that they've done enough testing, and so on. And even then, they will tell the AI, if you need help, come back to me. I don't see that going away. Now, do I know? No, but it's because of we will be able to do more and more complex things, and I think we'll have humans more and more involved in helping. The more complex, the more you need the humans helping.
All right, Irving, I'm going to ask that we move on and talk a little bit about the implications of all of this for CIOs and other leaders. So let me just set this up a little bit. Um, so, why should CIOs debate these scenarios now? Well, so basically, I'll just give it sort of a simplified frame and then you can elaborate on this. If I were a technological leader and I believed that option two was the correct option, and I worked with my enterprise on that assumption. But if it turned out to be option one, then I face obsolescence. If, on the other hand, I banked on it being option one, but the reality was that it turned out to be option three, then I would have blind spots. So, from a risk management point of view, it might be best to assume that we are, in fact, entering into option three, where AI is a technological revolution, because if it turns out that we're wrong, um, at least we have built resilience in our enterprise and we can, uh, you know, if it turns out to be option one or two, but we prepared for option three, we're still going to be okay. Do you generally agree with that analysis?
Yes, I do, but especially in the world of business, what's very important for the CIOs and the business in general is pick tasks where it makes sense for AI to be involved and help, and then train your workforce to work alongside the AI to do those tasks. And we're not doing that quite well enough yet. I think that uh, a lot of companies are having trouble deciding which processes can AI help the most in the business to develop new products, to become more productive. I think most businesses would say, well, but people are using it, individuals, let's say the way you use it so well for personal productivity, but personal productivity by itself does not necessarily improve uh, product creation and new processes. And Tom Davenport has done quite a bit of work in this area. And so the businesses need to figure out what makes sense for the business to become more productive and create better products and services. And that's the hard part here. And we are in the very, very early stages of that. And people have been writing a lot of have been writing a lot of articles that people do uh, all kinds of experiments with AI, but few of them come to fruition and they deploy it at scale. And I think it's because we don't know yet which of the experiments will really help the business the most. So
All
there's
right,
a
but
huge amount of learning.
so Irving, let's just drill down on this a little bit. So if you're running a business, would you agree that, if you're only preparing for incremental change and AI turns out to be this tidal wave, that could be risky too?
Yes, but I, you can do both at once, depending on the business. That is, you can start for the near term to start doing more doable incremental changes, which is also a way of training people. And at the same time, you can have uh, other people in your company getting ready for more sophisticated changes, monitoring how the incremental changes are working. And I would say, Alan, let's say when I was working in IBM in the Internet division in the 1990s, initially we picked relatively simple things like, well, it turns out it wasn't that simple, help companies instead of having to send you a catalog for what their hotel looks like, develop a website, and your people who want to see the rooms of the hotel can go to the website. Now you can say, well, a website, that's such a simple thing. Well, it wasn't a simple thing in 1995. It was a whole new thing that if you wanted to figure out what the hotel looks like, you get a website. Or if you want to explore a new car, instead of calling the car uh, dealership and asking them to mail you a catalog, you can go and see things in the websites. And those turn out to be quote unquote simple examples, but they were doable, and the companies learned a lot by doing them. And I think that with AI, maybe
So,
because,
Irving, it sounds like what you're suggesting to leaders is that they need to hold these three possible futures of
yes,
option one, two, and three in their
yes,
heads simultaneously,
yes,
and that they don't have to pick one or the other, but they can be aware that we might be in option three, a total cognitive revolution,
yes.
but at the same time, if some of their workforce prepare for the possibility that this is option two, it's a softer change, it's a continuation of ICT. It's not an either or proposition.
It's not an either or, and the way to figure it out is in the marketplace. This is very important, Alan. The technologies take place in the lab. They get deployed at scale, which is eventually how you translate technology advances into profit. They get deployed at scale by working in the marketplace with clients. And and you do different things with different clients, and as you learn, you can move more in one direction than in another. That was absolutely the case with the internet, and it's not the case yet with AI, because I really believe CIOs and companies, even very big ones like Salesforce and Amazon and others, are still in the learning stages, but over time we can figure it out. And this will be different for different companies because it depends on the business they are in. So, for example, at the symposium, uh, was it Vagesh Dave, who is the CIO of a company that does a lot of massive engineering projects looking for oil. Am I correct?
Yeah,
That
yeah, Vigesh, and I believe he was on your panel last
he
year.
was in my panel, and he mentioned a simple use of a kind of agentic AI, which is, you know, watch out if workers are wearing safety gear. Now you say, that's it? You're using AI to see if workers are wearing safety gear? Well, it turns out that looking at workers out in wherever they're building the oil exploration platforms is, one, very boring, and two, critical. Because if they're not wearing safety gears, then they can get badly hurt, and it's an important application. So he did it. That's an example of picking something doable that's helpful to you, as opposed to, no, the AI will build the platform. Okay, maybe 10 years from now you will use it much more, but do it incrementally in the marketplace. That's what a lot of the advice is.
All right, Irving, we're coming close to the end now. I just want to take a moment to talk about the role of inquiry and humility, which is the basis of the new inquiry series that you and I are going to be hosting. We have 7 episodes that we're going to do between January and April. And so the mindset, at least from my point of view, is that, being right isn't really what we care about. It's being prepared to understand that people need to be flexible thinkers. You're going to have to, in
Yes.
the AI area, you're going to have to work through uncertainty. There may not be a single right answer. And
Right.
so, what you and I have been trying to do is to frame the questions very carefully, come up with what the possible answers are, and guide people to thinking about them and really letting the audience make their own decision about what combination of answers is right for them. Do you have anything about this ethos of the inquiry series you want to add?
No, this gets back to learn in the marketplace and learn through discussions and learn through concrete examples. And that's what we're trying to do in the inquiry. Have a discussion among us and maybe other guests to figure out what's going on and what is likely to happen, but always reminding people we don't know what is likely, we don't know what will happen. We are discussing options and we'll see what works.
And so for our discussion today, I guess I'll say that it will be history that decides which are the 3 options, or what
It will
combination
be
of the options that we're
combination.
actually living through. It's not going to be decided within our lifetimes. Maybe our kids, maybe Brianna, my grandchild, 3-year-old grandchild, maybe she'll know. And Irving, I'll ask her to be sure to let us know how this plays out.
Well, the fact that she is with you often when we're talking about these things is very impressive because her little brain is absorbing all this, so you never know.
You never know. That's right. Yeah. So when you and I are talking, she's often in the back.
Of the car.
She thinks it's like having a one of her one of her cartoons on.
Yes,
With us talking. So anyway, so I think this has been great. I think we've come to a good
yes,
close.
it is a good close, Alan, and it's always very exciting for me to do this podcast with you, and I'm looking forward to the inquiry sessions where we're taking this to the next level.
All right, Irving. Thank you very much.
Thank you.